Now, one club that would not be getting Friday nights at the moment in a rolling fixture is the North Melbourne Football Club, and the priority pick is back firmly on the table, Sam. So David Noble, the coach, first put this on the table in his first year at the start in April, I think after about 5 or 6 games. North have had a shocking run since David Noble's been coach and before David Noble took over. They've got a lot of issues, North Melbourne, and this is something that is really, really worrying the AFL at the moment, Sam.
Yep, I think that's right. And I guess the first question, Ross, when you come to this discussion about priority picks is how much of the wound has been self-inflicted here?
Well, they've got 21 players delisted over the last 2 years. Here we have it for the viewers to have a look at. In 2020 is the one. There's 13 players delisted. There's 3 100-game players in that. Like, you've got McMillan, you've got Marley Williams, Mason Woods is playing at St Kilda 60 games. Because list managers go, oh, they can't play, they're not going to be in our next, let's cut them. I think there should be a maximum amount you can delist off your list because it cruels clubs and teams and it exposes their underbelly like we're seeing with North Melbourne. Then it that's half the list in 2 seasons. We know why they do it, but now we're seeing the outcome. A non-competitive AFL team at the minute.
But prior to round 1, Ross, when you were looking at their list, were you thinking, hang on, they've cut way too deep here? Or was it, look, they've got a good bunch of young kids, let's hope that they close the gap and they improve on last year?
Who are they? Well, we're still finding out about the kids. They had Curtis Dib on the weekend, he was good. But you think Thomas is a very talented player.
Davis Uniacke.
And Uniacke, but plays. And you got Simpkin.
Yep.
But they're around the edges. I mean, they got rid of and there's always lots of a 60-goal key forward in Brown. So would he be handy for them at the minute? So you're always trading off the present to the future, but on present exposed, they've cut deep and the underbelly, it's a big climb back from where they're at. And we see clubs, Melbourne took 20 years.
Nathan Buckley articulated their issues pretty well in comparison to other clubs who should have been thereabouts at the bottom 4. This is Nathan Buckley.
Other teams that were around them, Adelaide and Hawthorn, potentially seen as fellow bottom 4 members, and they are showing just spirit and growth and connection with and for each other, and it looks like they're going places. They're moving forward. North are stagnating. They're not really showing their fans or anyone where they're going with their footy, and it's a hard watch.
Nathan's spot on. He's spot on there. They shouldn't be further behind the Adelaide Crows or so far off the Adelaide Crows, who are nice and competitive, Hawthorn. And Ross, to me, getting a kid in your door is the last thing. We're talking about priority picks. I've seen so many guys go into weak and poor football clubs. How many Suns players have we seen over the years go in as highly talented players and go out the door? So this is a lot about the Suns. But to me, I'd rather could we get Mark Williams, say, for example, who's been wonderful for Melbourne? I'd rather a Mark Williams or a Ross Lyon come into my football club.
So you think extra cash instead of players?
To top up and develop players and harness players, because to be honest, they go into a poor club anyway and they spat out the door within 4 years.
Culturally, it changed. We saw it at Melbourne. I would like to see a response from North. What you want to see is they got hammered and then they played Geelong. All you're looking is, I called that game, commentated as a specialist. You wanted a response, but they lost contested ball by -20 against Geelong and they were 6 goals down. And then they get going. You know what? Don't worry about asking for priority picks until you show us in the first quarter. You can have a real dip because Ross, that's what we're looking at.
What they need is a 5-year plan. They're out of Tasmania. We think they've got a new president who's come in, Dr. Sonia Hood, who's saying all the right things.
New facilities coming. A coach, David Noble, who's not been an AFL coach before, and we don't know whether he's the right person for the job, to be brutal. I mean, he just might not work. You've got Alistair Clarkson, unemployed.
Superstar.
Unemployed by choice at the moment. You've got a
connection to the club.
A former North Melbourne Premiership player over at West Coast, and things aren't doing too well over there. We're going to talk about coaches in a minute, but I think North need a long-term plan. I think this is an area that the AFL hasn't been able to fix, and under a more brutal administration in a different time, I hate to say it, they'd be at the Gold Coast or Tasmania by now.
So, I mean, North Melbourne told us, they told us on the record at the start of the year that their aim was to bridge the gap of the margins that they were suffering last year. And in a similar way, David Noble said they wanted to do what Brisbane tried to do a few years ago when they went 5 wins, and then made top 4. Now, on the 6 weeks that we have to view that, they've gone the other way. They've actually gotten worse. So I don't think, and they're not doing this right now. They're not crying out for a priority pick. But they can't.
The talk has begun, though, Sam.
Yeah, but they can't be failing at what they set out to do, and then use that as a reason to call for a priority pick. I don't think
there are some people that can go hard early, but I think Nathan Buckley, just out of it, he's really objective.
Yep.
They were strong words. Basically, he's saying we're not seeing the spirit and the fight that teams at a similar stage of the cycle, like Adelaide, are doing. That's all we're asking for here. Nothing more, nothing less. And that is something that's controlled by the mind and effort and spirit.
In the last month, Ross, they played Brisbane and it was just a train wreck of a game, non-competitive. Then they rebound against the Swans. Then the Western Bulldogs' first quarter was as bad as you saw. Diabolical. And then the weekend where the weekend
was diabolical.
He's pretty much asking for an AFL team, can you just compete for a quarter, then go for a half? That's how far they've fallen, North Melbourne, at this point of their time.
And sometimes you've got to get like Zeeble, who's a tough player. Yeah. You know what? We need some spirit. Don't put him on ball in the last quarter. Put him in there from the start when they're getting beaten up in there and let him get to work. And I think Carlton learnt that. When Teague come in, he said, don't worry, we'll put Murphy and Curnow and that back in and give us some grunt. And he turned them around. I think sometimes the development, you've got to earn your right to stay in there. And I think you've got to get some hard nuts in there having a big dip.